My name is Vivian Calloway, and the day I was supposed to marry the love of my life was the day my world shattered. The chapel shimmered with white roses and candlelight, a hush of joyful anticipation settling over our guests. I stood at the altar, radiant in my gown, my heart swelling, with a hope I hadn't realized I possessed. Then he burst through the double doors at the back. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It was a violent intrusion. Mark Calloway, my fiancé and my boss, stormed down the aisle, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't stop at the pews, didn't even glance at our stunned guests. He came directly to me, ignoring the gasps, the scattered whispers. His voice, usually so smooth and authoritative, was laced with venom. "Vivienne?" he snarled, the sound echoing through the stunned silence. "You're fired." He didn't offer a reason, just a look of utter contempt. My dream, my future, dissolved into a public spectacle of humiliation. The world tilted, the white roses blurring into a single, crushing defeat. But to truly grasp the seismic shock of that moment, you need to understand the Vivienne who stood there, one of Manhattan's most prestigious financial firms. My office on the 38th floor overlooked the city, a concrete jungle I believed I was destined to conquer. I lived for the hustle, for the thrill of crafting a winning strategy, for the quiet satisfaction of seeing my ideas shape the market. My life was a relentless cycle of early mornings and late nights, fueled by ambition and countless cups of black coffee. Mark Calloway, my mentor turned fiancé, was the architect of my career. He was charming, impeccably dressed, and possessed a silver tongue that could disarm anyone. Yet, beneath that polished exterior lay a cunning predator. The recognition I craved remained just out of reach, swallowed by the shadow of his ego. I was overworked, underappreciated, and constantly battling for credit that was rightfully mine. Despite the professional battles, my wedding to Mark had become a fragile beacon of hope. It was meant to be my personal triumph, a rare moment of joy I had finally allowed myself to embrace amidst the corporate grind. I envisioned it as a sanctuary, a sacred promise in a world that often felt cynical and transactional. I once believed that wedding day would be the start of everything. I had no idea it would be the end of my old life and the beginning of a whole new war. The world tilted, the white roses blurring into a single crushing defeat. Mark's words echoed, "You're fired." I stood there, frozen, the weight of 1,000 eyes burning into me. My pristine white dress felt like a shroud. The guests, initially shocked, began to stir, a ripple of uncomfortable whispers spreading through the chapel. My mother, bless her heart, rushed forward, her face a mask of horror. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My dream, my future, dissolved into a public spectacle of humiliation. The beautiful chapel, once alive with joyful anticipation, emptied in a blur of averted gazes and hasty apologies. Some guests just left, unable to face the spectacular disaster. Others offered sympathetic, fleeting glances, but their pity felt like another layer of shame. My bridesmaids, once so effusive, now stood awkwardly, not knowing what to say. It was a humiliation beyond anything I could have imagined, a public execution of my dreams. That day, I didn't just lose a fiancé and a job. I lost my reputation, my standing, the very identity I had meticulously built. Vivian Calloway, once a rising star, was now merely a public spectacle. The future I had envisioned, one of professional triumph and personal happiness, crumbled into dust, leaving only ash. The days that followed were a suffocating haze. I retreated into my brownstone in Park Slope, the very home Mark and I had shared, which now felt like a tomb. Every corner held a memory, every empty space a phantom of what was supposed to be. The news channels, the financial blogs, they all carried the story, twisting it, sensationalizing it. Whispers of insubordination and unprofessional conduct clung to me like a stench, poisoning my name. The world I had known, the world I had fought so hard to conquer, had turned its back. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The taste of failure was bitter and constant. My phone rang incessantly with concerned calls, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I cut off everyone, friends, colleagues, even my own family, drowning in a despair so profound it felt physical. I was completely alone. The financial pressure was a slow, tightening noose around my neck. No job, no income, just the crushing weight of a mortgage and mounting bills, all of which now seemed insurmountable. My beautiful office on the 38th floor, once a symbol of my ambition, was now just an empty space I was locked out of. A few days later, a company messenger delivered a generic cardboard box to my doorstep, filled with the cold, sterile remnants of my career. A few framed photos, a favorite coffee mug, some old notebooks. It felt like they were sending back the ashes of my old life. I didn't even open it. I just shoved it into the back of my closet, another painful reminder of everything I had lost. Weeks bled into months. I spent my days in a blur of apathy, the vibrant city outside my window, a world I no longer felt a part of. My brownstone, once filled with light and purpose, grew dusty and silent, mirroring my inner turmoil. But reality, like a persistent creditor, demanded attention. The bills piled up. I knew I couldn't hide forever. I needed to sort things out, to start somewhere, even if it was just to clean up the wreckage. The first step, I decided, was to declutter the house, to pack away the remnants of a life that no longer existed. I started with my small home office, a space I'd once cherished for late-night work sessions and brainstorming new strategies. It was piled with papers, old files, and forgotten mementos of a happier, more ambitious Vivienne. As I painstakingly went through each drawer, each file cabinet, a wave of melancholy washed over me. This was all that was left of my carefully constructed world. In the bottom drawer of my old mahogany desk, the one my grandfather had passed down to me, tucked behind a stack of outdated tax documents, I felt a loose panel. My fingers traced the edge, a faint ridge beneath the smooth wood. Curious, I pulled it, and with a soft click, it slid open, revealing a shallow, hidden compartment. It was a relic from the desk's antique design, a secret place meant for forgotten treasures or hidden confessions. And there, nestled within, was a single aged envelope. It was thick, slightly dusty, and the paper felt fragile, almost crumbling at my touch. I vaguely recognized the style, possibly from a former Sterling & Co. colleague from years past. Who would send me a letter like this? And why would it be hidden here in my grandfather's desk? The mystery pricked at the edges of my numbness. My heart hammered with a mixture of apprehension and a strange flicker of curiosity, the first genuine emotion I'd felt in weeks. With trembling fingers, I broke the brittle seal. The paper inside was yellowed with age, the ink a faint sepia, almost illegible in places. As I unfolded the brittle sheet, my eyes scanned the opening lines, and a name jumped out at me, bold and unmistakable: Mark Calloway. The words swam before my eyes, barely legible in the dim light of my office. This wasn't just a disgruntled employee's rant. The faded ink, the yellowed paper, they spoke of a distant past, yet the message hit me like a physical blow. The lines weren't merely a story. They were a detailed blueprint of betrayal and misconduct, striking not just at me, Vivian Calloway, but at the very foundation of Sterling & Co. The words swam before my eyes, barely legible in the dim light of my office. This wasn't just a disgruntled employee's rant. The faded ink, the yellowed paper, they spoke of a distant past, yet the message hit me like a physical blow. The lines on that page weren't just telling a story. They were drawing a detailed map of betrayal, a blueprint of misconduct that didn't just target me, Vivian Calloway, but struck at the very foundation of Sterling & Co. The letter was from someone named Philip, a mid-level manager who had quietly left the company years ago, long before I even joined. He detailed suspicious transactions, inflated project budgets, and mentioned specific names. Owen Marsh, a consultant whose departure had always seemed abrupt, and Alex Mercer, a name I recognized as one of Mark's favored juniors. Philip wrote of Mark's insatiable greed, of shell companies and offshore accounts, of ideas stolen and careers sabotaged. My mind, previously numb, sparked to life with a jolt of terrifying clarity. This wasn't an isolated incident. My own experiences, my projects, Mark's increasingly erratic behavior, it all began to slot into place. The Horizon Project, my brainchild, the one Mark had pushed so hard, was mentioned repeatedly in Philip's archaic script. He alleged it was a front, a grand illusion designed to siphon funds through a network of shell companies that existed only on paper. 4 LLCs, he warned, registered under seemingly innocuous names, all tied back to the project's main budget. My firing wasn't just about my ideas or my wedding day humiliation. It was a desperate, brutal move to silence me. I had been getting too close. My pain didn't vanish, but it transformed. The hot, stinging tears dried, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. This wasn't personal anymore, or at least, not only personal. Mark Calloway had not just ruined my life. He was systematically plundering the company I had dedicated my life to, betraying every colleague who ever trusted him. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. Justice for Philip, for Owen Marsh, for Carol, my old mentor, who had tried to protect my intellectual property and was subsequently pushed out. This was about defending the integrity of Sterling and Co. from a predator disguised as a visionary. I needed help. My first thought was Renata, an old friend from my university days, now a formidable financial analyst with an uncanny knack for numbers. I knew she'd understand the labyrinthine world of corporate fraud. I called her, my voice strained but steady, and she agreed to meet, a flicker of concern in her tone. We met in a quiet coffee shop in Astoria, far from Manhattan's prying eyes. I laid out the letter, my preliminary notes, and my gut feeling. Her initial skepticism was palpable, a defensive shield against what seemed like an outlandish accusation. But as I methodically explained the connections, linking Philip's warnings to specific project timelines and Mark's unexplained wealth, her expression shifted. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, narrowed as she began to see the patterns I was tracing. By the end of our 4-hour conversation, her skepticism had vanished, replaced by a steely resolve that mirrored my own. "This isn't just unethical, Vivian," she whispered, her voice tight. My brownstone, once a tomb of despair, became my war room. Days blurred into nights, fueled by cold coffee and an unwavering focus. I used every shred of insider knowledge I possessed, every access code I could remember from my time at Sterling and Co. Renata guided me through public financial records, SEC filings, and corporate registries. I cross-referenced names and dates from Philip's letter with obscure company documents, searching for the phantom LLCs for any trace of the money trail. The pieces slowly clicked into place. Owen Marsh's $460,000 transaction, which I had once dismissed as a minor anomaly, was merely a diversion. The real scheme was far larger, a complex web of inflated invoices and phantom vendors tied to the Horizon project, funneling millions into offshore accounts. Alex Mercer, the junior I thought was just a rival, had been Mark's accomplice, tasked with stealing my ideas to legitimize the fraudulent project. Carol, my mentor, had been framed and forced out when she became suspicious of Alex and the project's true nature. Mark hadn't just stolen my work. He had systematically orchestrated my career, pushing me into projects that would facilitate his fraud, then eliminating me when I became a liability. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the wall I was building, not to protect myself, but to imprison him. I was ready to demand a board meeting, knowing I wouldn't just be asking for my job back. I would be taking back everything. The moment I stepped into the Sterling and Co. boardroom, a hush fell, thick with unspoken anticipation. My cashmere blazer felt like armor. In my hand, not a teacup, but a simple, elegant mug of black coffee, cool against my fingers. Across the long, polished table, Mark Calloway sat, his usual arrogant smirk fixed on his face. He caught my eye, a flicker of something dark behind his forced smile. The tension in the room hummed beneath the surface like a live wire. "Good morning, gentlemen," I began, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the silence. I placed my mug on a coaster and unzipped my portfolio. My name is Vivian Calloway, and I'm here to present evidence of systematic fraud and corporate malfeasance that has been crippling Sterling & Co. Mark stiffened, his smirk faltering just a fraction. I began methodically. First, I presented Philip's faded letter, projecting enlarged images of its key passages onto the screen. This letter, I stated, written years ago, was the first alarm bell. Next, I unveiled the cold, hard data Renata and I had meticulously assembled. Financial records charting the flow of illicit funds through dummy corporations. Renata, my financial analyst, was instrumental in tracing these transactions, I explained. I presented emails between Mark and Alex Mercer, revealing their collusion in stealing intellectual property. Then, Owen Marsh's sworn affidavit detailed his reluctant involvement, how he was coerced by Mark, and how the $460,000 transaction I'd once dismissed was just a tiny, visible part of a much larger, insidious network. Mark's composure shattered. His face flushed a dark red as he lunged forward, banging his fist on the table. This is preposterous. Lies. He roared, his voice cracking. On my wedding day, no less, I countered, my gaze unwavering. A calculated move, Mark, to silence me, to deny me access to critical company data, and to ensure I couldn't uncover your scheme. The board members, initially hesitant, exchanged glances. Their faces, once neutral, now mirrored a growing horror. Each of Mark's desperate attempts to deny, to deflect, to attack my character was systematically dismantled by the irrefutable evidence. He shrank in his seat, a humiliated, broken man. The verdict was swift and decisive. The chairman, his voice stern, addressed Mark. Mr. Calloway, the evidence presented by Vivian Calloway is overwhelming and irrefutable. Effective immediately, your employment with Sterling & Co. is terminated. Before Mark could utter another word, 2 federal agents stepped forward. Federal agent Patricia Morse nodded curtly at me before turning to Mark. He was escorted out of the room, a bewildered, pathetic figure, his career and reputation irrevocably destroyed, his smug confidence replaced by utter despair. It wasn't revenge I felt, not triumphant gloating, but a profound sense of justice, a quiet satisfaction that resonated deep within my bones. The board, now somber, offered their apologies and solemn recognition. The chairman cleared his throat. Vivienne Calloway, he began, we are deeply apologetic for what you've endured. Your integrity and courage have saved this company. I paused, considering. The power, the prestige, the chance to reclaim my old life. It was all there. But Sterling & Co. was no longer my home. My journey had transformed me. Thank you, Chairman, I said, my voice gentle but firm. My path was not one of rejoining a tarnished past, but forging a brilliant future. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But for me, it wasn't revenge. It was a cleanup. It was choosing integrity over power, even when it cost me everything. It was walking away from what was expected and stepping into what I was meant to be. And in the end, it gave me back so much more. It gave me my name, my reputation, and a fierce, unwavering belief in my own strength.